In this video, we'll be taking a look at how we can use the Unreal Engine 5 and use Sequencer to set up a very simple camera move and then do something simple like maybe control the value of some of our lights within our scenes. So let's go ahead and take a look at this and let's get started. So one of the first things I'm going to do is go up here and change from the mode that we're looking at, the default viewport. We're going to put this in the cinematic viewport mode. And this is going to change things to be in a 16:9 aspect ratio by default. And right now we don't have a level sequencer, and that's what it's telling you about right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to cinematics, and then let's just go ahead and say let's add a level sequence. So you can add either a level sequence or a master sequence. We'll just make one for this level, so I'll say add level sequence. It's going to ask you where do you want to save this, and it's going to give you the opportunity to name something. So I've actually made in through here, I've got this area and I've made a sequencer folder, so you can put it again wherever you want to put this. And let's just call this class demo like this, and I'll go ahead and save that. And this will open up a level sequencer for us. So from here, I'm going to use this icon right here that you can say create a new camera and set as the current camera cut. So I'll go ahead and do that. This is going to create a new camera for us. You're going to see it's probably going to change the location and the aperture and everything else like that. So I'm just going to quickly move this into a location for my starting point, that one I start from. And let's go somewhere right around here and try to use the rules of thirds like this. And then from there, under the transform, you can see we can add a new key, and we're at the 000 mark for this. So let's go ahead and add a key for this for transform. And if you open this up, this is going to key location, rotation, and scale. Now it's possible that you can key each one of these different channels separately if you want. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to open up this right here, and I'm going to open up a calculator. I'm going to keep this at 30 frames a second, and just want to do 1.5 minutes of animation. So that would be 90 seconds. So I'll take 90 and multiply by the 30, and we'll get 2,700 frames for this. So I'm going to extend this to 2,700 frames, just like that, and do the same thing here. Now this will be the endpoint of our animation that we're going to be looking at. I can click and then just drag this all the way over. We could take our camera cut. We're not exactly ready for that just yet, but we can drag this all the way to that location there, and maybe drag it even just a little bit past that. So it's also possible for us to put this is our time slider that you can see, so we can scrub through the animation. We can actually put a numeric value in for this, just like that, and that will set this. If we right click on it, we should be able to tell it to set the end time like that. So now our end time should be capped right at that point there. Now these clips can go past the duration of this. This will just set up something for us to be able to loop back and forth between. And this can serve for us to scroll back and forth and see more of the timeline, shrink it up. And then so if we want to zoom in on a particular area, let's say we go to the front, we can shrink this up like this, and that will show us just more of that time slider that we've got right there at the beginning. So I'll drag this out so we can see the entire thing like this. The other thing I want to do is I'm going to just go to the very end, and we'll go again to 2,700, and I'm going to make this loop. So I'm going to just key another keyframe right here at the very end of this. So one thing I did notice is maybe sometimes it is a little bit tough to get this to be exactly accurate for me, and so that's where I'm going to take this and scrunch it down, and then just check the numbers here like this. And if I click on one of these keyframes, we put an exact number here. That's one way that we can get this to line up right here. So that should go right to the 2,700 mark. So now that I've got that set up, I know everything should be good for that. I can have a little more confidence that I can start to lay down some other keyframes on here. So maybe what I've found for doing some very simple camera moves is if I go to the very center part of this animation, which would be 1350, I can go and zoom in on another area that I want to focus in on, and maybe I use this as a shot that I want to establish. I'm going to go ahead and just set another keyframe for the transforms like this, and what I should end up with is an animation that just moves in and out very easily. So if I want to loop this, I can put this on loop playback range, and then I'll just put it at the very beginning here and then play this and then see what this ends up looking like. So it looks like we've just got a very nice simple pan in and out for the movement on here. Okay, for the sake of time for this video, I didn't let it play all the way through just because it is going to be a little bit longer of an animation. Something else that I wanted to pull to your attention is that it is possible, if I click on here in this first frame right here and take a look at this, we do have access to the current focal length. And so if we put this up to something like 90, let's see here, it really flattens things out quite a bit as far as the perspective. If you want a really fisheye lens looking thing, you could put it on something like 10, and you can see how this really changes things quite a bit as far as how dynamic the perspective is. The default for that was 35, and if we put that on there, you can see it's going to be a zoom of 35 millimeter. And then we could also change something about the focus settings on here. So if we selected this, and I'm just going to drag this over so we can see the details panel just a little bit better. So I'm going to pull that over just like that. So if we take a look at the focus settings over here after we have this set and selected, we can open this up and we can actually tell it to draw the debug focus plane for us on here. And so if we pull this in, we can start to see this is where this is actually going to focus at. So hopefully this is obvious for you, but this plane, wherever it intersects, this is going to be the area that it's most in focus, and then you're going to get a depth of field effect maybe out past that a little bit. So maybe I put this at 790 like this, and I'll set a key right at the very beginning. And again, because we're looping, I'm going to go to the very end, and I'm going to set a key there as well. And I'm going to go to the middle of the animation, so I can just click any one of these keys and it'll take us directly there. And at that point, let's take this this focal distance and we'll pull this in right about here. So I'll do maybe 450, and then set a key for that right there like this. And I think we should be good to go now at this point. And after we've got that set, we don't necessarily need to draw this anymore, and we could take a look at and just see how this is starting to shape up as far as the animation is concerned on it. So again, this is going to be a very simple camera motion that we have within through here, just like this. Okay, and I'm just going to push it to the end and see how it looks as it starts to repeat back. You can see how that just flows in and out. It makes a very simple camera move like that. Now, beyond that, you could go to other places within here, and this is why I tend to do this, is let the camera make this simple sweep for me. And at that point, maybe I go to the center point and I pick another camera vantage point that I think is maybe just a little bit interesting. So I let the computer figure out most of the motion for me. And I'm going to pull down just like this a little bit more and try to make this just a little bit more interesting to take a look at, and then I'll go ahead and keyframe the transform on that again. And so then now as I scrub through here, you can see we got that nice pan, comes down through here, goes here like this, and as I come back through, maybe I'm somewhere in here, 2100, so a number like that, and maybe at that point what I'm going to do is just pull the camera over this way just a bit and set keyframe for that. So then now we've got some motion coming in, it dips down a little bit, comes all the way to the top here, and then starts to come back. So you can see I did there is quite a bit of movement and rotation on here, so that might be a little bit extreme, but we could see what that potentially looks like as we play through right now. And so as the camera move over time, maybe it's not as abrupt, but as we scrub through, it's seems like a pretty extreme motion there. So I don't think that's too bad, and I think it tends to look somewhat interesting. So I was pushing the subject matter from over here in the areas of thirds, and then pushing it over here a little bit, and just trying to get a dynamic look on this. And again, we can see how this flows from the end of the animation through to the beginning. Okay, and so that would just rock back and forth and keep going through this motion over and over again. So the other thing I can show you is that it's possible to add other things into here other than just doing camera motions. So let's go ahead and grab the light that we have in our scene. I'm just going to tap G to get our commands or game mode back, and I'll go ahead and select the camera in here. So I'm finding this rectangle light, and we can just click and then drag it into this area, and it should give us the ability to start to manipulate that. Now if I don't want to see all these icons, I can tap G and through here like that. Let's see what we have access to in here. And if I always want to get back to these keyframes on here, I can open this up, and maybe I just select one of these to go to the very beginning. So that's up to you how you want to get within there. So what I've got here right now is just access to the intensity, and we can change light color and things like that. So I'm just going to go ahead and set a keyframe at the very beginning, and then at frame 2700 I'll go ahead and I'll set another key for the intensity. And what I thought might be interesting is if we go to the middle part, 1350, like this, and maybe we make this quite a bit more intense. Maybe we can overdrive that quite a bit just to make sure it's really, really visible and really apparent for us. We could do that. And then maybe we come to this other part over here, and maybe we dip this down below where we're at. So the default value was 2. Let's see if we go to 0.5 what that looks like. So currently what we have is whenever we set one of these keyframes and we change the values on it, it's going to update that key for us just like that. And so as we scrub through, again, this is going to be able to preview this a lot faster this way. Okay, and I'll just come through here, and I do want to see what this maybe looks like as we change these lighting values and just come down a little bit, so we're getting more of a real-time preview of what things look like on here. So again, that's a way that we can set up some camera motion, affect the depth of field on there, and also maybe control something about what's going on with our lighting from there. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this. I'm going to go ahead and save this current sequencer, and we're going to go ahead and exit out of sequencer. So currently what I do have under, I made a folder called Cinematics, and I have this animation already put in here. Now if I tap G to see the icon for this, you can see what it's set to is set to autoplay, and I've got this looping. So I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to leave this. So what we should be able to do is drag our new one in here, and what I'm going to do is, actually it's dragging another copy in, so let me delete that. So I'll go to this class demo where I've got here, and I can right click and say move to, and I've already got a folder that I set up, and so I've got a folder for cinematics, so I can just throw that in there. So then I can have a folder for, let's scroll up and find this, all the different cinematics that I'm starting to produce here. So I can put this on autoplay and then loop indefinitely, just like that. And you can change the play rate. So if you want it to go faster, you could put that to 2 or 10, whatever you want. And if you want it to run slower, you can do that as well. So what I'm going to do now is just go ahead and hit play and then see what we have as far as this. And we don't have this playing correctly. Okay, so what's going on here with this? What we need to do is go back to the sequencer that we have, and then under our camera cuts, we need to add a new camera cut to this. So we'll do new binding, and then what we've got is this. I could rename this so cinema camera actor, and if I just want to keep these organized and give it a new name, class demo, like that. So let's go ahead, and then I'll just make sure that I'm binding to that correct camera like that. And then now, if you've got, this is because you can set up multiple cameras and you can do camera cuts. And so if we wanted to do that, you can add these different cameras cuts that go within here, and you can fade in between them and add, fade to black and go between these different cuts. Since we're just going to do something very simple, we just need this one camera cut like this. So let's go ahead and save that, and we'll go ahead and hit play. And this should be our new animation that we just set for everything. So it should just do this very simple camera motion, and it should just move in very gently and go down to the bottom like what we put. So it should start to climb towards the top. We've got our focal length set for things on here. So everything should be nice and focused whenever we come through. We changed it to where our lighting value was going to go up as we come up to the apex here. And then after that, that lighting value is going to dip and go a lot darker. And then the only thing that's going to be driving this scene will be the emissive values, because in my scene I just have emissive on some of these different materials. And then I have this one rectangular light that's at the top up there. I do have a volumetric fog turned on, and have exponential height fog within the scene. And so then again, as it goes all the way towards the back, we're about 3/4 of the way done now. And when it comes back to that starting location, the lighting should go back to its original value, and then just start to cycle back through this over and over again for us. Yep, so it's coming through, and it's going to go to the next cycle going through. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit escape for that, and let's go ahead and take a look at how we could potentially render this out. Okay, to render things out, we're going to use something called Movie Render Queue. I want to make sure that it is loaded as one of our plugins. So if you just type in movie like this, you should be able to find Movie Render Queue. And mine is enabled. If yours is not, go ahead and enable that. And once you have that, if it's enabled, then you should be fine. But if not, you might have to restart the engine. Not really sure about that, but if that tells you to do that, go ahead and restart the engine. And then if we go to Window and we go to Cinematics, we can go to this Movie Render Queue like this. and then you could just hit a new render job like this, and then you're able to pick basically what you need to do. So I already have this level sequence that we just looked at, that we just made, called class demo. You can select that, and it's going to be whatever you named that thing. There's going to be an area where you can go ahead and tell it where you're going to output this. By default, this is going to be in the Unreal area for documents, and it's actually going to put it in the project, and there's going to be the project name, and then saved, and then movie renders is the default thing for that. So let's go ahead and click on this unsaved config and open this up and take a look. Now we do have a output JPEG sequence that you see here, and if we take a look in through here, we should be able to change that and say if we wanted to render out in PNG, so we've got less compression on the images that we have on here. And let's see if we can actually delete out the JPEG one if you want. I don't think I'll change anything with the deferred rendering. Now if you want, you can change something about the anti-aliasing on here, and we could take this and put this, if we take a look here, it can give you some idea about this, about what this is going to be. But from my understanding, it's going to be able to take a look at previous frames and post frames to figure out what the anti-aliasing should actually be for this. And so if we put this at a setting of something like 8, and then I'm just going to put this override anti-aliasing and set that to none. And our output, depending on what size that you want to output this to, the directory, and this is going to be the name. You can change some options on here if you like. I'm just going to go ahead and leave this as 1920 by 1080 like this, and I'll do this output frames step. And we could use a custom playback range if you wanted to render out a very specific amount of frames from one part to the other, but if not, then it should take that from what we have set up within the actual sequencer itself. From there, again, we could do a custom frame range, but I'm going to leave that alone. I'm sorry, custom frame rate. So I don't know if that default on that was set to 24 frames a second, but what we were setting up before was 30 frames a second. So you might want to take a look at that and change that. And I'll go ahead and accept that like this, and then I'll go ahead and click render local, and then should push this up here like this. And now yeah, so this first frame, if you saw that pop and go down towards the bottom, I did forget about that particular thing. And what that is, let's go ahead and kill this real quick. We'll leave this here. We'll go to open up the sequencer on here, and if we look at this, and I'll go -50 so we can get in a little bit closer on this, and then scrunch this down so we can see what's going on here. This camera cut needs to exist a little bit before this for whatever reason. So you could push it back. I think it only has to be like 1 frame, and that's fine as long as it's 1 frame. Couldn't really even tell you the exact reason why this happens. I did watch some video content on that, and they were explaining what was going on with that. Yeah, so let's just go ahead and now we got that set. Let's just go ahead and render again and see if this goes correctly for us. And you can see it starts to spit everything out pretty quick here. And I think you can see this subsample, what we set for 8 for this. This is it taking the amount of time to calculate that anti-aliasing that we set up. And then so it should tell you how many frames in that you are and how much time time is remaining on here. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this and we'll see what this looks like when we get done. So real quick, while this is rendering out, I did want to show you that it is possible to go into the Unreal Projects area, and again under the area where it says saved and these movie renders, this is where it's spitting out the different frames. So it is possible while it's rendering this out, you can open up the frames and then take a look at them, and you could check them, and maybe if you're doing a really large render and a really large animation, you might be able to find out if there's any big glaring problems that you need to identify first before it spits that all out. But right now this is just cranking away and using a bunch of machine resources, so that's why it's running a bit slow like this. But again, I just wanted to point out that it is possible to check your renders just like you would an offline renderer. And again, if you want to be able to see if you can identify any problems while it's rendering, that way if you need to go back for any reason and stop it, that's possible. Okay, everything finished and rendered up, and it took just a little bit under 12 minutes to render that. And if I check the folder for this, and we can see all the different frames that were made on here for that. So just scroll back like this, and I'll go ahead and close that up. The next thing I wanted to show you is if we want to take a look at this in something like After Effects. I'm going to make a new project. So let's go into After Effects, new project, and I'll make a new composition. And you can call this whatever you want, and then this can be Circle City class demo. So you'll be able to name this whatever you want. Where you rendered this out 1920 by 1080. So if you did a different size, you'll go ahead and put that up there. And you got your frame rate that you have on here. And this should be seconds on here. So if I did 1 minute and 30 seconds like this, we'll go ahead and hit OK. And that should give us the everything we need to pull this in, pull our images in. So I'm just going to right click and say import, and I'll do multiple files like this. Let's just go ahead and navigate to where that folder is, and I've got under my Unreal Projects. Again, that's under saved. It's going to do movie renders, and you can click the very first one and you can tell it it's a PNG sequence, and it should recognize the fact that it's got a bunch of images in here and it's got a number associated with that, so it should pull that in. And so I did multiple files, didn't actually need to do that, so I'll just say done for this. Okay, and wait for that to finish. So I actually had to restart After Effects. That crashed it, so I just redid this and just said import and then did file instead of multiple files. But I don't think that should have caused anything to crash, but you can see it immediately pulled everything in and loaded it up like this. And you can see that it put the sequence in for us like this. So we could just test it out and hit the space bar and then take a look at that to see the motion on here. It looks like everything looks pretty good. So again, I want to just check this and make sure that it loops. The only thing is with this, so the camera sequence does loop, but I have everything set up on blueprints as far as moving and timing. So if I wanted to make sure that the whole sequence would loop and then all the animation of this, I would have to make sure that all these elements would rotate in a way that would actually line up for that. So you're going to see something like this planet is going to jump from here. But that's one sequence loop inside of Unreal. It's going to loop over and over because it's real time, and it just goes indefinitely until you kill it. But if you are going to render out a movie like this, you would have to figure out rotation values and things like that, and make sure it lines up with whatever that particular timing is that you have on things. Okay, so there's that. Because things don't loop for us, one thing that we could do is just right click in here and say new solid like this, and we could choose a color, and if we wanted to fade from black, we could do that, and then push this over the top of this. We could open this up, go to transform, and under transform is opacity, so we could just turn this on to start setting keyframes, and then maybe we push this out right to here, and depending on how many seconds, so if you wanted to do 2 seconds like this, I could do this and then drag the opacity down to 0, and then that would go from black and then fade this in, then come all the way here. I could go to the very end like this and then put the opacity to 100 like that, and then drag this in right here, and I would do 28 and then make this whole numbers like this. And then for the opacity, then on that I would put that down to 0. So we just set up a keyframe here, and it starts to fade out, and then as we go back around, so we could again hit the space bar to check that, and it's just going to fade out and then fade back in, and then we could have it loop that way. Okay, so there's that. Go ahead and save this, and depending on where you want to put that, so here's the location where I'm going to save, so I'll just go ahead and save that like this. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go say File, and I'm going to export, and I'm going to add to Adobe Media Encoder. And that's going to take a second to load. Okay, that might take a second for everything to load up, but if you want, you could click in here, and then we do have access to start changing what the file type is that we're going to make, and maybe choose compression settings and things like that. So I think what I'm going to do is this: I'm going to maybe say match source, and I think everything should be set for us. You can take a look at that and make sure everything looks good to you. You could also potentially do use maximum render quality, something like that, but the format is H.264 as far as that goes, and that should be, you can see it's going to output this MP4 for us, so we should be good to go there. I'll hit OK. Just like that. Just wanted to check some of the settings on that, and then we can tell it where do we want this to actually output. And so it's going to output by default the same area that I saved it in, and I think it makes its own folder called with _AME at the end of it. So everything's good to go there, and let's go ahead and hit play, and it's going to take a little bit of time to render this out. Okay, everything's finished rendering out, and it took a little over 3 minutes to actually be able to render everything out. I can go ahead and click on this output file, and it should take us to where it actually sits. Double click and open that, and then take a look at this in a video player. Just going to go right click and say play. Actually, sorry, that was on a different monitor, so let me pull that over, and then we can just take a look. And I'm just using the VLC media player, so you could use the media player of your choice, and we can check the video quality, and everything's looking pretty good, looking pretty cool. And then I'm not going to let this whole thing play all the way through, but I'll go to the end, and then I do have this set up to loop, and it should loop all the way through for us. Okay, so I know this is a really quick video. There's a lot of information on here, but it's not actually getting very deep into any particular part of this, but I wanted to show you as quickly as I possibly could how we can set up a sequence inside of Unreal, how we can set up our camera, get some nice camera motion on things, how we can tweak and change our lighting values, then be able to kick those renders out and pull them to something like After Effects, and then output the file. And then that way we're ready to go, and we can take our file and we can upload it to something like YouTube, or we've got it for something that we can use inside of our portfolio. Okay.